Hi everybody, Brent Jones, New Home Source Realty. How are you? Happy Friday. It is summertime in Texas. We've actually had a very mild summer by our standards. We've barely even had any triple digits, but it's August in Texas and it's a little warm outside. Now, I've got 3 families moving here from Arizona and they think we're babies because their typical temperature is 115 degrees and that's in the shade. So anyway, glad y'all are here. I want to talk a little bit about appraisals, home appraisals today, the who, what, where, when, and why of home appraisals. So we're going to get into that, just answer some basic questions. Before we get into it, click notifications, follow me, like this video, and leave a comment. So a lot of people, when you're going to buy a house, a lot of people have questions about the appraisal. Why is it necessary? Who orders it? What's it comprised of? Just what happens with the appraisal and why it's even necessary. So let's chat about that. Now, in today's market, with the market being so ridiculously insane, appraisals or appraisals coming in not meeting value, it's pretty rare because property values are going up about 25% here in North Texas, so it's not much of an issue. Things are appraising. Even if you overpay, they should still appraise. Depends on a per case situation. And also in today's market, if you're able to, depending on what kind of loan you're getting, to make your offer as attractive as possible, you could waive your right to terminate the contract if the house doesn't appraise. That's typically for conventional buyers. But the who, what, where, when, and why of appraisals. So first of all, who orders it? Well, the lender orders it and the buyer pays for it. Now, if you're paying cash, you don't have to have an appraisal done. You could still order one if you wanted to, if you were just curious. But if you're paying cash, you don't have to have an appraisal. But if you're going to get a loan, conventional, FHA, VA, you have to have an appraisal. And we'll talk about why here in just a little bit. What is an appraisal? It's a professional opinion of the value of the property by a licensed, trained appraiser here in the state of Texas. So it's his or hers professional opinion of what your house is worth. And then they don't just pull numbers out of the air. It's based on comps in that exact subdivision or very close to where that house is. And it would be comparable to, as apples to apples as possible. Wherever possible, same age, same square feet, again, same area, same subdivision, same features, pool or no pool, that kind of thing. So you can have as apples to apples as possible. And it is his or her professional opinion of what that house is worth. When's the appraisal ordered? Well, here's one thing. It's typically ordered about 7 to 10 days before closing. Now, you could put in that you want to do the appraisal ahead of time. You could put in that request, but typically the appraisal is ordered 7 to 10 days before closing. And that drives people nuts because if the property doesn't appraise and now we're scrambling, we got 7 to 10 days before closing and now the house didn't appraise, now we got a major hurdle to overcome. But the reason why it's not ordered till 7 to 10 days before closing is because the mortgage company, your lender, doesn't want you to pay for an appraisal if for some reason there's something wrong with your file and it looks like you're not going to qualify for the loan. So really, once you've got a clear to close, all the requirements, it's come out of underwriting, you've met everything, and they now are going to loan you the money, that's when they order the appraisal. Because again, they don't want you to pay for an appraisal on a house that you're not going to end up getting. But it is at the latter part of the transaction, and it does drive people crazy. What if it doesn't appraise? We're going to talk about that in a minute. Why is it necessary? Well, the lender is not going to loan you $500,000 on a house that's only worth $400,000. They're not going to do that. Before they loan you all these hundreds of thousands of dollars, they want to be rest assured. They want to do their due diligence and be sure that the house is worth what they're about to loan on. So what mortgage companies loan on is the contracted sales price or the appraised value, whichever is lower, if that makes sense. So what you agreed to pay for it on the contract, the executed contract, or what it appraised for, whichever is lower. That's what the mortgage company is going to loan on. Now, some questions that I've been asked is, can you appeal an appraisal? If you get an appraisal and it doesn't come in at value, and value would be what the contracted price, sales price was, can you appeal the appraisal? And the answer is yeah. I will tell you, it's not easy. There are some realtors that will tell you, oh yeah, I got a great track record of appealing appraisals. I doubt that very seriously. Again, the appraiser is a licensed, trained professional. He or she knows what they're talking about for the most part. Now, there are exceptions, but for the most part, they know what they've got experience. They know what they're talking about. And when they assign a value, to get them to come off that opinion, it's difficult, because basically you're asking them, hey, this is what you do for a living, that you assigned this value, this is your opinion, this is what you do for a living, this is how you support your family, and would like for you to admit that you made a huge mistake. Will you do that for us? So it's very difficult. It's very, very difficult. Not impossible. And I've had some appraisals come in that, the house is here and they picked a comp 3 miles down the road. You can build a case for it, but for the most part, it's very difficult to get the appraiser to change his or her mind. Who picks the appraisal? Who picks the appraiser? Well, back in the quote-unquote good old days, the mortgage companies had like a pocket of appraisers that they liked, and they would send all their business to them, and it was kind of a good old boy network, kind of a, hey, you want us to keep sending you business? Then you need to be getting us value. That's kind of what led to the crash of the mortgage industry back in 2007. It's kind of properties were artificially inflated in order to meet the value because the appraisers didn't want to lose out on that block of business. Nowadays, since that 2007 crash, the government has mandated that lenders be at an arm's length of what appraisers they use. There's still a pool of appraisers that they can use, but it goes on a rotation kind of basis, and that the mortgage companies now are more distant from the appraisers, and they can't hand pick who the appraiser is going to be, is what I'm trying to say. The magic question, what happens if it doesn't appraise? Well, again, you're typically going to be about 7 to 10 days out from closing. So now here we go, everything is smooth sailing, and now we got this major hurdle to overcome. So if it doesn't appraise, here are the options. Now, if if you're a VA buyer or a FHA buyer, you could terminate the contract. And that's part of the reason why in this ridiculous seller's market, sellers are not excited about getting an offer from an FHA or a VA buyer, because they know that if it doesn't appraise, you can terminate. And now they've been quote unquote married to you for the last 4 to 6 weeks. And now in the 11th hour, you've decided to terminate the contract. And now they've got to start all the way back over and put the house back on the market and look at all the potential buyers they could have, would have, should have had that they missed out on because they went under contract with you. But back to the question, if it doesn't appraise, this is what can happen. There's a few scenarios. The seller can come down to the appraised value. The buyer could bring the shortage in additional funds to closing, or it could be a combination of the two. The seller can come down some, and the buyer brings more money to closing, and that gap is eliminated. I will tell you from experience, again, when you're about 10 days out from closing, the seller is motivated at this point to make this deal work. The buyer is motivated at this point to make this deal work, because the seller, they've already got their exit strategy in place. The buyer, they've already hired movers. Both of them are way down the road wanting this transaction to happen. So to just completely bail out and start all over from scratch, there's not much motivation to do that. The motivation is, by hook or crook, what can we do to make this thing work? What can we do to keep this thing alive? What can we do to go ahead and close this thing in 7 to 10 days? So there's usually a lot of motivation on both the seller's part and the buyer's part to make that appraisal shortage go away. Again, the seller can come down, the buyer, if possible, can bring more money to closing, or it can be a combination of the two. So, hope this helps, kind of the ABCs of appraisals. Anything I can do to be of help, Brent Jones, New Home Source Realty. I've been doing this 30 years. Love to help. Google me, 98% approval rating. Any questions you have real estate related, feel free to give me a call, 214-649-4528. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye. Okay, turn off, please.